So we saw some examples of capacity and how it can affect the competitiveness in many ways, loss of customer goodwill, delays and so on. So let's start by first defining the term capacity. Every operating system uses a variety of resources which may include manpower, machines, different types of tools, even space. All these are part of an operating system, and in some sense capacity directly relates to the quantum of these resources that an operating system in fact has. So it all depends on how much of manpower, how much of machines, how many machines do we have and so on. If you take the example of a garment manufacturer, the number of cutting and sewing machines, the number of people employed in the shop floor, and in terms of production, in terms of quality assurance, all these will determine the capacity of the system. On the other hand, if you take the case of a restaurant, the number of dining spaces, the capacity of various machines used for cooking, the number of servers and chefs, availability of utensils, plates, cups, there are so many of these resources. All these in some sense will collectively determine the capacity in the system in the case of a restaurant. That is one way to understand capacity. Another way is that capacity also denotes the maximum output of products and services one can achieve using these resources. So how do firms actually go about measuring capacity? Typically, capacity is measured in two ways in any organization. One method is to measure the capacity on the basis of output. Just to give you an example, an automobile manufacturer such as Toyota will perhaps measure capacity on the basis of daily production of vehicles. For example, they might say that a particular plant, the capacity is 20,000 vehicles per day. So here we are using an output measure to indeed talk about what is the capacity. There is another method to measure capacity which will be based on the input resources. Take the case of a software service provider. I just mentioned TCS, Tata Consulting Services, or a management consulting firm, or a professional law consulting firm. All these kinds of firms generally measure capacity in terms of the number of professionals that they have. They are not measuring on the output. In some ways, they are measuring on the input in terms of the human resources that they have. So what is of interest to us, given these issues that we have discussed, are the following. How do these multiple resources in an operating system eventually determine the capacity of the system? I have 4 machines, there are a few workers. How does it affect the capacity? This is a question of interest to us. Also, how do they affect the outcomes and customer oriented measures such as output, delivery promises, waiting time in a service system? All these are of interest to us. So we shall discuss these issues in some detail in the next video, because this is how we should be able to connect the notion of capacity, the way to measure capacity, to how it matters in terms of business competitiveness and outcomes that we see in the marketplace.